This Impact Wrestling review was brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Try it, and Sting will job to Austin Aries next time.
Okay, come on. Come on, it's gotta be in here somewhere. I've looked everywhere else. I've been tearing this place apart for months. If it's not in here, I don't know how the hell I'm gonna prove that I didn't... What? Wait. Is that... Is it? It is! I found it! The hammer. I can't believe it was here the whole time. Oh, god damn, what a load off. Well, that's one mystery solved. Finally. And now, on to Impact. How you felt about the first Impact of the on-the-road era probably depends on what you were hoping for. If you were hoping for a clean slate and the writers pushing forward in a new direction with fresh storylines and characters, you were probably disappointed. But if you were hoping for damage control on the stuff we've been getting on the show for a very long time now, then congratulations, you got your wish. So the whole show is built around the jobbers and scrubs. But they have Bully Ray now, which at least makes them somewhat watchable. He cuts a promo. It's a fine promo. He's obviously relishing being a heel again. Although he seems to be under the false impression that his heel turn surprised everyone. I don't know what the hell could have possibly given him that idea. I wish he had taken this opportunity to fill in some of the inconsistencies with this angle. Why him and Devon like each other again, why the jobbers and scrubs laid him out at the wedding, stuff like that. It would have been pretty simple to do, but they didn't bother with it. That irked me a little bit, but if they were going to try to plug all the holes in this thing, they would have been out there all night. So then Bully calls out Hogan, and he dares Hogan to fire them. And what's silly about this is that it implies that simply firing the jobbers and scrubs was and is a possibility. But 2 of these guys are current title holders, so they really can't be fired. And 2 others, Doc and Mike Knox, aren't even supposed to be employed by the company in the first place and are actually in the arena illegally. Kayfabe-wise, Doc and Knox are not supposed to have contracts. As per the Win at Bound for Glory, they had free access to the Impact Zone, but they're not in the Impact Zone anymore. And yet they're still being allowed into the arena when Hogan is well within his rights to have them arrested or thrown out. I don't understand why. Plot hole! So they're taunting Hogan with this throughout the night. They take out Los Stereotypicos, which I'll admit made me pop huge. Then they take out Kurt Angle for like the 50th time. But then at the end of the show, those guys are perfectly fine and showing no ill effects whatsoever. If you were looking for a way to make this faction look dangerous, that wasn't it. Just saying. More on that later. Gail Kim and Tara versus Mickie James and Velvet Sky. Don't worry, Velvet fans, I'm not going to make fun of her for forgetting what corner she was supposed to go to. Although, I could. A solid knockouts match. The work was just fine here. But, again, it's 4 women that we've seen wrestle each other countless times before, which meant that I found it kind of boring. Not through any fault of theirs, but it's just more of the same old stuff. The only fresh matchup you could make here is Velvet versus Mickie, so of course they're on the same team. What I found most interesting about this was the stuff with Gail Kim and Taryn Terrell, which ironically completely overshadowed everything else that happened here. Now, they're getting close to pulling the trigger on that one, and it can't happen soon enough to finally get a new knockout in the mix. Jesus Christ. Aside from that, there's nothing new to report. Velvet pins Tara, so we don't know who the next challenger for the title is yet. It seems Gale and Taryn is the focus right now. I don't know why we can't have a title feud in addition to that, but it seems that's not the priority at the moment. Then they do a Robbie E versus Rob Terry rematch, because this match killed the crowd at Lockdown so badly that TNA just had to do it again.
You people are fools!
Surprisingly, this was actually a lot better than what they did on Sunday. Terry crushes Robbie in like 60 seconds. He dances for the crowd. Segment over, quick and mostly painless. The whole thing lasts about 3 minutes. This is what should have happened at Lockdown. I don't know why we had to see this match again, but you know what? Screw it. At least they got it right this time. So, yay, baby steps. One of the things I was really looking forward to this week was the return of AJ Styles. And they built this up in a really compelling way, teasing that AJ was going to come back with some kind of darker anti-hero tweener persona, if not outright heel. A big character departure for AJ, which is why I was so intrigued by this. And I think it came off perfectly. They announced the return of AJ, but then Bad Influence come out to troll the fans dressed up like LOD. Because it's Throwback Thursday, why the hell not? This was hilarious. God, I love these guys. So then James Storm takes offense to them profaning the honor of the Road Warriors. He has an impromptu match with Daniels, which he wins, of course, because Bad Influence apparently are just not allowed to win matches for some reason. And the match wasn't really anything to write home about, but the ending was. The heels beat Storm down, AJ shows up, he runs him off, and then he attacks Storm himself. Nice and simple. It makes you wonder what AJ's thinking. Sets up a feud with him and Storm. Awesome. I'll take it. This makes perfect sense, because it was Storm who pinned AJ in that match that led to him being shut out of the world title picture until Bound for Glory. I don't think we've ever seen this feud before in singles competition, so it gives you new stuff to do with AJ, and it finally gives James Storm something to do, period. He's been completely directionless since Bobby Roode suckered him out of his world title shot, but no more. Storm now has a relevant program. AJ is doing something new and different. It's win-win. Thumbs way up on this segment.
Yes!
So after just 1 week, the writers have already fallen back into the same old pattern with Matt Morgan. Last week he attacked the World Heavyweight Champion, and this week, Joseph Park. Not a knock on Joseph Park at all. I'm just saying that for all his big talk, Morgan once again gets lost in the mid-card like he always does. I do like that they're at least going back to the storyline of him having a grudge against Hogan. He was doing that when he first came back at Bound for Glory, and it was interesting. But they could have done a lot with that. But then they just dropped it, because apparently someone thought him losing tag team matches with Joey Ryan was more important. It seems that's done now. That's probably for the best. Now, will they follow through with Morgan this time? If history is any indication, probably not. Anything's possible, but unless he can break this pattern he's been stuck in for years now, I don't like his chances. In the meantime, Matt Morgan-Joseph Park is a good matchup to make from a character standpoint, and I think they could get that over easily. The problem is, we've seen these guys feud once before, and the results weren't that good. I expect the gimmick switch from Abyss to Joseph Park will make it more entertaining this time, but will the matches be any better? That's a wait and see. Something I really liked this week was the dynamic between Hogan and Sting, even though so much time being devoted to them did get on my nerves. There was a nice little nod to continuity here, because if you'll recall, it was Sting who convinced Hogan to accept Bully Ray and give him a chance in the first place. Now Hogan is really pissed off, and he's directing a lot of that anger towards Sting. And it's one of those things that isn't really necessary and could so easily be brushed off, and in another company probably would be brushed off, but it's a nice little touch to throw in there just to keep the consistency of the characters, and that wasn't lost on me. I appreciated that. And the Wet Dream Team giving Sting a hard time about that was pretty funny. I totally want one of those dirty heel shirts, by the way. But it leads to Sting challenging Austin Aries to a match instead of, one of the jobbers and scrubs. Oh boy. Oh boy, this match made me mad. On the one hand, Austin Aries in the main event of an important show like this? Hell yeah. He also carried Sting to easily the best match Sting has had in quite some time, probably the last several years, thank you very much, A-Double. But the booking was more than a little frustrating. Aries basically has to tone down his style, wrestle in slow motion just so Sting can keep up with him, Sting getting the Superman treatment, easily circumventing interference from Bobby Roode, kind of making these guys look ridiculous when they were the biggest heels in the company last year. And when you consider how competitive this was, how Aries was booked to not know how to apply a sharpshooter, how Aries didn't win like he should have, and in fact had to be saved from a loss to Sting by the Jobbers and Scrubs, you start to realize that something's just not right here. Not taking anything away from Sting, all due respect to him, but what does booking him this strongly against Austin Aries really accomplish? Nothing. It does nothing for Sting, it hurts Aries, and that's it. And it's painfully indicative of TNA's continued over-reliance on Sting. Okay, you want him on the show to draw. People still tune in to see him. I get that. But if you ever want some of that ratings-grabbing power to rub off on someone like an Austin Aries, like a Bobby Roode, you have to start letting go of this naive idea that Sting is the answer to all your problems. To continue booking Sting like this is really counterproductive, and that's me being polite about it. To use another example, The Undertaker is booked to be pretty much unbeatable, but Taker is used as a special attraction. He's there for a few weeks a year and works one match if he's lucky. But Sting is still wrestling on a semi-regular basis. And at 50 years old, TNA is still booking him like he's John Cena to the detriment of a lot of other people. And you might think it's cool now, TNA, but when Sting finally does leave, and you realize that you protected him so much when you had him that you weren't able to properly push or properly get over all these other guys, you're going to think differently about this. At least they protected Aries, in that he kicked out of a lot of stuff and he didn't have to do the job. Thank God for small favors. Although the NWO-esque finish did not go unnoticed. Let's not make a habit of that, please. Once again, Bully Ray calls out Hogan, daring him to fire them. Hogan says that firing the Jobbers and Scrubs would be too easy. Just fucking fire them! And instead, he says that he's empowering the rest of the TNA roster to fight the Jobbers and Scrubs. Which is very strange because it implies that until now they didn't have the power to fight the Jobbers and Scrubs? I don't know. So several babyfaces run down, though not nearly the whole roster that Hogan alluded to, including Kurt Angle and Los Stereotypicos, the recipients of those beatings from earlier in the night. Surprise, surprise, they're all perfectly fine now. There's another huge brawl, because we've only seen that in this storyline about 100 times. But the difference is, this time the Jobbers and Scrubs came out on top. So they actually did not get their asses handed to them by a bunch of good guys of equal numbers. So that's something. It was pretty chaotic and too crowded with too many people in the ring, but the Jobbers and Scrubs actually looked somewhat dangerous here by the end of it. And if you're wondering why they weren't getting booked like this several months ago before a whole lot of people gave up on this faction and wrote them off as a complete joke, well, so am I. And I really don't have an answer to that question. So if you disregard some pretty stupid details, like the people they beat down recovering really fucking fast and Bully Ray backing away from a crippled Hulk Hogan on crutches, this episode was mainly focused on re-establishing the Jobbers and Scrubs as some kind of viable threat. You know, something that would not have been necessary had they not been booked like total ass clowns since Bound for Glory, but what's done is done. Now, how you feel about them now probably comes down to personal preference. For me, this really doesn't change anything. I'm long past the point of taking these jokers seriously in any way. That's just not going to happen. I am on board with Bully Ray as the champ, but not the Jobbers and Scrubs. Even if they've been winning matches non-stop these last few months, the lineup is still flat-out embarrassing, and the best booking in the world isn't going to change that. I will acquiesce that Bully Ray helps them in that they finally have a figurehead with some kind of real gravitas, and God knows Devon couldn't make that work, but when Bully Ray talks, you pay attention. And that was not the case with this faction for the last 10 months. So in that sense, this was a step in the right direction for the Jobbers and Scrubs. Although, I still think this faction is beyond saving, and really not worth the time and effort put into it. Personally, I think Bully Ray should just ditch these losers and go off on his own, but that's just me. This wasn't a bad impact, but considering it was the first episode of a new era in the company, I didn't feel like it delivered what it should have. It didn't feel like a whole lot had really changed. Jobbers and Scrubs beating people up, lots of focus on Hogan, Sting in the main event. Kind of feels like business as usual, doesn't it? I like parts of it, mainly the AJ Styles angle, and the new set does look fantastic, but it wasn't a blowaway show or anything. Maybe I'm being too hard on it, because realistically, with all the things that could have gone wrong, this could have potentially been a complete disaster. But most things fell into place for them, and they delivered a competent show that most people seem to like from what I've read, so they deserve props for that. That being said, however, I think some people have been kind of overrating this one. Probably because of the euphoria of TNA finally being out of the impact zone for good. And I will admit, that does account for a hell of a lot. I was feeling it too, and it was awesome. A real arena with a real crowd makes a real difference. Let's not undercut that little detail. But I was hoping they would have something big in store for us creatively, and we really didn't get that. It just felt like more of the same stuff. And if we separate the show from the fact that they're out of the impact zone now and judge it on its own merits, I found it a little underwhelming, mostly due to so much focus being on Hogan, Sting, and the Jobbers and Scrubs, who, outside of Bully Ray and to a lesser extent Kid Anderson, I have absolutely zero interest in. And yes, that was to be expected on the Lockdown Fallout show, but with everything that's come before, I just think this faction is worthless, and I don't think I'm going to change my mind no matter what they do. The spoilers for the next show do look a lot better. Maybe this one was just about setting the stage for the next chapter in this angle. Hopefully they hit the ground running next week. Until then, later.
Especially when a top wrestler goes against a boss, big things happen.
Indeed. Now it's time to go on to over. Oh, what the hell's going on here? What the?
Fools. Pathetic, misguided fools prattling on week after week, screaming from the rooftops in vain for an open ear to hear you, but met with only closed minds and broken dreams left unfulfilled. Two impudent children who play at being men, and a perversion of science who fancies himself a conqueror. You upload your propaganda, blissfully unaware of your own insignificance, and herd your trifling audience like lambs to the slaughter. But in the battle for primacy, there can only be one. You have forgotten your place, and now I have come to restore the balance. Know now that there is nothing you can do, and no one that will help you. Resistance will only hasten your coming agony. And when the final bell tolls, and the children's bodies are ash in the wind, and the machine lies prostrated before me, you will know that you bore witness to the magnificence of the unstoppable, undefeatable, one true...
Hey, what's all that noise? Are you Skyping with someone in here?
Get out!
Fuck! I don't want to know.
No, I swear I didn't know what he was up to. I'm stumped. I have no idea how he pulled this off. Invading your video like that? And that creepy laughter you'd been hearing for months, was that him the whole time? And that's crazy! How long has he been planning this? Well, I guess it answers the Terminator NJ question at least. And he still hates that guy, obviously, but why? Got so many questions. Okay, all right, look. Don't panic, okay? You guys sit tight. Don't worry. I'm going to get to the bottom of this.